Hello? 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 Good day. We had ended off with the navigation acts being enforced more by the English to enforce the system of mercantilism. Keep the money within the empire. The 7 Years' War has just occurred. Come on, there we go. And English taxes are going up. The colonists have paid very little for the 7 Years' War. Now, under mercantilism, they probably thought the job of the British Empire is to provide defense, and so we don't have to pay for defense. But the fellow Englishmen over in England were paying a huge amount in taxes for something that was not benefiting them. A British person paid, a colonial person paid 1/20th the amount of taxes that a British citizen paid. And that was the point that we had left off, the navigation laws. Now they will be enforced. And the Proclamation of 1763. On October 7th of 1763, the British government issued a proclamation. This provided for 3 new mainland colonies. First of all, we only had the 13 here, and then Canada was a colony. Now we have Quebec. We have, there's a dividing line, East Florida and West Florida. After the French and Indian War was over, many land-hungry American colonials had burst over the Appalachian Mountains, flooded over into the grassy western lands. So previously, this was all French-controlled land, this was all Spanish-controlled land. You had no protection, and you had to get permission to even come into their territory because it was like going to another country. And so we were down the back of the Appalachian Mountains. We were landlocked in here. Now, with the war being over and this being acquired by the British, suddenly many Americans suddenly break over the Appalachian Mountains into this new territory. A tiny rivulet of men like Daniel Boone had already trekked into Tennessee and Kentucky. That would be this area in here. Then, out of the clear blue sky, the London government issued its Proclamation of 1763. It flatly prohibited settlement in the areas beyond the Appalachian Mountains, pending further adjustments. It also placed the West under military command, and no new settlers were to cross over the Appalachian Mountains till further notice. Settlers who had already moved to this new territory were supposed to go back to the east until further notified. So this is our birthright, hadn't our blood been shed in the 7 Years' War to acquire this? Well, a little bit, but not a whole lot. And we burst over into this new territory. Now England says, no, get back on the other side of the Appalachian Mountains. Why? The Indians were revolt, and England said, we need time in order to solve the problem. So here is an idea of approximately where the proclamation line ran. Pontiac's rebellion was out here going on in the Ohio country. This declaration created considerable opposition in the colonies, especially among land speculators. Land speculators would come and buy a big chunk of property, and then as people slowly get moving out here more, they sell that land for a much higher price. And so not only were individuals wanting to settle here coming over, but land speculators were buying up big chunks. But England said, no, you cannot cross over. We're in charge of protection. And Pontiac's rebellion is in full swing. We don't want you to fall prey of this. Once we've settled the situation down, then you can move into this new territory. In complete defiance of this paper proclamation, colonials streamed westward into this new territory. So are we saying, thank you, Mother, for protecting us and making sure that we are safe? No, we say, how dare you tell us where we can and cannot go. We didn't care that they were trying to solve Pontiac's rebellion. We clogged the roads westward, or the trails actually back then, into this new territory. Well, the Sugar Act is passed in 1764. Let me see, what year did I tell you the proclamation was? Hang on. 63. So the very next year after the proclamation is the Sugar Act. 63, 64, 65, 60, I think 7. All of these years right in here are very tumultuous for the colonials. And one thing will pass or happen right after the other. Well, in 64, the Sugar Act brought about a significant change in British policy. Before, the purpose of parliamentary taxation had been to control trade, not so much to raise money. Remember the navigation laws? Keep the money in the empire. It must go on a British ship. It must stop in a British port. You must use colonial or X number of British to unload your ships, to sail your ships, all of that. Control trade. Keep it in the empire. Don't be trading with the Dutch and the French. No. Well, now, this new Sugar Act was not just to control trade, but to raise money. Now Parliament approaches the law with the purpose of raising money, but they will actually lower the cost of imported molasses. We call it the Sugar Act. You get sugar from molasses. It's a sweetener. But the Molasses Act had not been enforced. So on the books was the Molasses Act, and the colonists were ignoring it. Now England says, hey, we are going to lower the cost, but we are going to enforce it. These taxes were going to pay for the soldiers that were being kept in the West and the customs officials who would bring violators to trial before British officials who were less likely to acquit violators. So now we got all these soldiers out west. Pontiac's rebellion has been resolved, and yet this tax is going to pay their salaries for all these soldiers out west. And if you are caught violating the Sugar Act, you are going to be tried by British officials, not by your local people in Boston or New York or South Carolina, wherever it happened to occur. No, you are going to be tried before British officials. Are they going to acquit the violators? No, it might have been in the past. If you got caught, the local court would say, we told you were going to caught one of these times, James. You got to be more careful how you're smuggling and doing all this stuff. And give them a slap on the wrist and a small fine. Well, now this is British officials, and they are not going to give you a slap on the fine, slap on the hand. They are going to make you pay your fair share. You are not going to be acquitted if you violate this Sugar Act. I love this cartoon here. This is showing a protest against the Sugar Act. And here the Sugar Act is in a coffin. This is death for us colonials. And they are all making their way out to the tomb where hopefully they are going to, I guess, maybe bury the Sugar Act. But the funniest part of this whole cartoon to me is down here in the corner. The head of the procession is getting his leg peed on by this little dog. Well, in that very same year of 64 comes the Currency Act. This dealt with colonial money. It prohibited the colonists from issuing any more money, and money already in use was to be gradually phased out. The colonies instead were to use gold and silver for all their trade. This was to be very strictly enforced by the governors, and it would create opposition in the colonies. So each colony was making money of their own as well. This is not the king's money from England. This is colonial money. This is from the state of Georgia. This one here is Pennsylvania. This one here, where was it? I'll find it later. 40 shillings. This one is 10 shillings. And from Delaware, Newcastle, Kent, and Suffolk, the provinces of Delaware. Here is, granted this is a remake, but of an original coin from that time period. The problem was American colonials, the South in particular, but merchants owed British merchants a lot of money. We were importing goods from England, and we'll catch you next month, we'll pay you later. The problem was this, as England would have called it, funny money did not hold value when colonists paid in this money, this currency. By the time it got over to England, the Bank of England is looking at this going, okay, you say you have 40 shillings here on this piece of paper. We're not familiar with this bank. We know the colony, and so it was losing value. For the colonists, that was great because they could pay with these bills that would lose in inflation, and it was the British merchants who were losing money on all of this. And so England says, no more of this funny money. You cannot print anymore. That which is out there needs to be phased out. Instead, all debts had to be paid back in gold and silver. This, of course, would cause economic difficulty for the colonies because of supply and demand. The colonies were importing more than they were exporting. This creates for the colonies, a negative trade balance, an imbalance, and a good imbalance for England. You always want to export more than you import, because when you export, you have money coming in. When you import, you have money going out. And so the colonists were importing more than they were exporting. So they were paying a lot of money to British merchants for the goods. If you can only use hard, cold cash, the gold and the silver coins, pretty soon you are going to run out of gold and silver coins because you are spending more than you are receiving in products you're selling. This will cause the opposite to occur, and the value of the gold and silver, because of the shortage, supply, and demand, will go up. And so colonial merchants will have to pay back British merchants in a more expensive currency. But the purpose is to benefit the mother country. Does this benefit the mother country? Absolutely. In the meantime, the conspiracy theory. The colonists had begun a conspiracy back in the 1720s, 40 years earlier. They now bring it up to date in the 1760s. They say England has lost their liberties, and now they are trying to take away the colonists' liberties. They're out to get us. This isn't being done to benefit England, it's being done to benefit England and punish us. There is a conspiracy going on here. And the colonists will begin to see the sinister hand of England in everything that will be done. The British actually had a converse conspiracy theory about the colonists. They thought we were out to get them. Now, that one probably had a lot more truth to it than the other. But we have this conspiracy theory. England has lost her liberties and she's out to take ours. What one perceives, how one perceives reality, is more important than reality itself. Let me repeat that. Sometimes how one perceives reality is more important than reality itself. You're saying, no, what actually is, reality is more important than how you perceive it. No, how you perceive it is what matters to you. An accident takes place in an intersection. There is a person on the eastern corner, northeastern corner. There's another person on the southeastern corner, someone on the west southern corner, and the northwest corner. So all four corners of this intersection, there are people that are observing this accident. Will they report the same facts? No, because each one is observing it from a different angle. How you perceive the facts are more important than the actual facts. You work at a company and a position has opened up and you would like to take that position. It's one up, and you petition your boss and say, please, can I have this new job? And instead your boss goes out of the company and hires someone else. This person is single, good looking, got long hair and long legs, and you know why your boss hired that person. This is just not fair. Now, that may not be the perspective of the boss at all. The boss may say, you're a very good employee, but right now your table is full. You are going to school part-time. You have children that you are raising. When it comes to working overtime, we got this project and we need everyone to stay late tonight. You can't stay late because you got to go to daycare and pick up your kids. Every once in a while the school calls and you got to go get your kids because they've gotten sick at school and you're out for a couple days. You have too much on your plate. Now, when your schooling is done, when you're a little better situated, I would be happy to move you up in the company, but I don't want to add one more thing to your plate. And so I went outside the company and hired this single individual who has no children that they have to go pick up from school or anything like that. They can work late if they want to, or if it's necessary. And so that's why I hired that person. That doesn't matter to you. What matters is that your boss overlooked you, and how you perceive it is all that matters, not what actually happens. And so the colonists have a theory that England is out to get them. and they shall make sure that everything just falls into place in this conspiracy. And the very next year, 65, the Stamp Act. To raise revenues to support the new military force, the Stamp Act required the use of stamped paper or the affixing of stamps certifying payment of tax. Involved were about 50 trade items and certain types of commercial and legal documents, including playing cards, pamphlets, newspapers, diplomas, bills of lading, marriage licenses, wills, deeds to property. These are the stamps. There was either a stamp that was done to the paper, such as this, or when you bought something, they said that'll be X amount of money, pounds, and 3 pence for the tax. And so then they would, whichever stamp they were using, they would stamp your paper, your item, your receipt, with a stamp showing not only did you pay for the item, but you paid the stamp tax. This, of course, angers the wrong people. Involved were such things as commercial and legal documents. Every bill of lading that a merchant uses, you gotta pay for the stamp on it. Legal documents, anything done in courts, you gotta pay for the stamp on it. Playing cards, even those that want to gamble or hang out at the saloon and play cards. Does that deck of cards have a stamp on the box? Better have one. Pamphlets, newspapers. This is before TV and radio. The way people got their information passed on to them was through the newspaper. So you bought the newspaper, and then the guy is standing there with his hand out. I need another shilling for the tax. And then after you paid it, he would stick a stamp on your newspaper. The whole time you're reading that newspaper, you're seeing that stamp and you're knowing, I paid extra. Bills of lading, marriage licenses, wills, deeds to property. This is going to pay the salaries of the military force. Yes, it is England's job to provide us with protection. But why are we paying for it? Once again, mercantilistic system, that's England's job, not ours. And you have annoyed the wrong group of people. Parliament regarded all these measures as reasonable and just. They were simply asking Americans to pay their fair share for colonial defense. But the Stamp Act tax was a direct tax, obviously offensive to the consumer and clearly aimed at raising revenue. Here is America's idea of what the stamp is. This is an official stamp which says in French, why it would be in French, I don't know. Shame to him who evil thinks. How dare you think we don't have the right to collect this tax? We're simply asking you to pay your fair share. Well, what does the colonists think of this tax? An emblem of the effects of the stamp, of the fatal stamp. Yes, to us it is poison, skull and crossbones. England is killing us. This one is hilarious. This is the place to affix the stamp. And they have that same skull and crossbones. But this was printed in the bottom right-hand corner of the October 24th, 1765 newspaper, the Pennsylvania Journal and Weekly Advertiser. So here they print on the newspaper already in advance this skull and crossbones, and when you pay your tax, they're saying this is where you stick the stamp when you pay the tax for your newspaper. Cheeky. Angry throats raise the cry, no taxation without representation. I said this is a direct tax. There are two kinds of taxes, a direct tax and an indirect tax. This is a direct tax. The person buying the newspaper, the person processing the bill of lading, the person who is getting a marriage license, after they do their paperwork, they have to then go and stand in line and pay for the stamp to be put on your document. And the whole time, you know, I paid this tax, I had to pay extra. Here's the stamp on it staring at me in the face. It was a direct tax. And it managed to alienate the most articulate and highly educated segment of the American population. People get their information back then from the newspapers. If you annoy the newspaper people, are they going to write positively in their paper about this new stamp tax that is out there? Absolutely not. Journalists, lawyers, every legal document, merchants, educators, every diploma had to be stamped. If you anger a bunch of farmers out in West Pennsylvania, what are they going to do? Stand out in the fields with their corn and their cattle and scream? Who's going to care about that? But who they have angered here are the educated, the influential, those whose voice is very loudly heard with regard to this. Here we have a map of the 13 original colonies, and it shows where demonstrations took place against the Stamp Act. As you look at this, every dot is where a revolt, a demonstration took place. They're not out here in the, well, there's one, but it's still in a town, out in the middle of nowhere. No, they tend to be where the major population is, along the coasts in the towns. And another thing you will note, it tends to be located much more so in New England and the middle colonies than the southern colonies. This will become a problem going forward. If we are going to unite against England, we have to all be annoyed. And here you have just mainly New England and the middle colonies really getting annoyed. This is a New England thing, much more so than a southern thing. Here we have a demonstration in New York against the Stamp Act. And the folly of England, the ruin of America, the Stamp Act. And once again, showing it as poison, skull and crossbones. And everyone, as he's going through town, are cheering him on. Here is them putting up on a pole and stoning the stamp master. Now, this is done in effigy. And effigy means you can't actually string him up. So you make a dummy to represent him. And then we stone that dummy. This is done with burning in effigy, stoning in effigy, hanging in effigy. Anything can be done this way. So here they are stoning. Just a second. Becca, can I call you back in a minute? Bye. Here they are stoning the stamp master, the one who is providing the stamps, the British he is following British law and doing what England has asked. And everyone's picking up these big rocks and throwing it at him. Now, what I find funny is you got this big crowd, all of them angry. I guess this is a procession going down the street. First, they have here in front, once again, the coffin, we're getting killed by the Stamp Act, and then here's the. But what goes up must come down. And I'm thinking, how silly, you're throwing rocks up in the air at this effigy of the taxmaster, and yet how many of the people or children down below got hit with those rocks? Oh, that's good thinking. Here we have, I love this. There's a couple of teapots that each time something comes out, they have put it, obviously, for colonial purchase. No Englander would be buying this. But here, no Stamp Act. An angry mob protests the Stamp Act by throwing stamped documents into a bonfire in Boston in August of 1765. So you want to make us have to put things on stamped paper? You want to make us pay for these stamps? We'll show you what we think of it. We'll just have a bonfire here and burn up all this stuff, proof of our having paid the tax. Well, in the very next year comes the Quartering Act. But we've got 30 minutes on the clock, so I'm going to go ahead and stop at this point.